The time has come where you will learn about object-oriented programming. Welcome back to object-oriented programming using Java. Let's get right down to it. So if you pay close attention to my screen here, what we're looking at is a class. You can see that it is a class because of this keyword here that says class. And then this is the name of my class. Now there's a couple of things that I want to point out in terms of the parts of a class. First, this we can categorize this as a blueprint. We've built and written this class, and right now in terms of it being tangible, it's really not. It's just a class or a blueprint that's somewhere out there in memory. Now, inside this class, we've defined what we call instance variables. So over here are your instance variables. And to be more technical, these instance variables are called data. Now, we're going to get into what public means and private means. But for now, let's just leave them public. Okay, so now this is my data that belongs to this class. Good. We also have something else. We have something called an action. And in Java, an action is called a method. Can you see which is the action? I'll give you 5 seconds. Ding, 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 ding. If you said write output is the action, then you got it correct. Write output is my action of this class. When you write your classes, you are going to have more than one action, but we're using this preliminary example so that I can show you the different parts of the class. Now, if you notice, my action has a definition. This is my method definition. But I'd like to ingrain this in your mind a little bit more. So let's take a look at this in more detail. So looking at this here, again, this over here is my class name. Okay, so we can label this here and say, this is my class name. And this class name is arbitrary. It can be whatever I want. But for this specific example, it is called date first try. Now remember, the class name must be equal to the file name of your class. Which means that if I name this date first try, then my file name for this class has to be datefirstTry.java. A little bit further down here are what we call our instance variables. So we can say these are instance variables. This is the data of the class. Now, usually, as I mentioned before, this over here is called an access modifier. And you'll notice that it says public. My class access modifier is also public. And we can write it over here somewhere so we can say that this is our access modifier. And we're going to get into it a little bit now, where if you have an access modifier that's public, that means that it is accessible to anybody that wants to create or use this class. Okay, we're going to get into, notice how I'm saying class, because we are still in the class phase of object-oriented programming. We'll talk about what an object is in a little bit. Okay, so different parts of the class. We have our class name. We have our access modifiers, which are Right now we've declared them as public, meaning that they're accessible to anybody. And inside our class, we have the data, which is represented by my instance variables. So we can say that this here is my data. Sorry about the scratch. Okay. So this is what represents my data, and your data is represented by instance variables. So whenever somebody asks you, well, what data does this class have? You have to look at the instance variables. Then you want to look at the actions of the class. And in this case, our action here is this method. Okay, so this is an action, or we can just say this is a method. And like I said before, we will have more than one method in a class. So we can say that this is an action. Okay, and the method has a signature. So this here is a signature of the method, right? So this whole thing here is a signature. Now my signature is going to contain a couple of things. The first part is it's going to contain the access modifier. In this case, it's public. The second part, it's going to contain the data type. In this particular case, it's a void, so it's not returning anything. It's just performing an action. Sometimes you can have a data type that doesn't return anything, or it could return an integer or any other type of class. And then lastly, you're going to have your method name. In this case, it's called write output. So that is my method name. I chose to name it that. You could name it whatever you want. Now, what's inside the method is your definition. So we can say that anything between the compound statements here is my method definition. And for simplicity's sake, we just used a system.out.println. Now, inside your method definition is the best place to either use your instance variables or make changes to your instance variables. So notice how this is one instance variable I'm using, right? Month, it's declared as a string. Then I have day, which is another instance variable I'm using, right? And then year, which is another instance variable. Now that's not to say that you're not allowed to declare other variables inside your methods, but most of the time what you'll want to do is you'll want to have some instance variables inside a class, and you'll manipulate them in some way, and you'll use your method and actions to expose these instance variables. Okay, what I just talked about here is what we call encapsulation, which is one of the tenets of object-oriented programming. Why? Well, this is actually a bad example because my instance variables are public. Usually, your instance variables should remain private because that is how you encapsulate data. Encapsulate meaning that you hide the data from anybody that wants to use your class. Any developer that wants to take your class and use it should really have only the ability to use your methods, where you will hide the instance variables, but you'll use them in some way so that you can expose some things and hide others. Now, this is a class. Again, I repeat, it's a class, it's a blueprint. Right now, it's not being used. Now I want to flip the script and show you how we can use this class. And we're going to go into the second concept of class definitions and usability, which is instantiation. So stay tuned for my next video, which will talk about how to use the date first try class. To be continued. I'll see you on the next video.